Mortgage rates went down, home prices went up, buyer activity went down, and seller activity went up. But what does all that mean to you if you're in the market to buy or sell a home? Hi, this is Andrew with the Andrew Smith team at eXp Realty, and welcome in to my monthly real estate market report for August 2021. And for those of you that are new to my monthly market reports, the whole idea of these reports is to kind of give an overview in what's going on in the real estate market overall. My team covers North Texas as well as Southern California. And so since we cover a wide area, we kind of have a unique perspective on some of the different things that are happening in the market. Likewise, in these monthly market reports, we kind of provide an overview of all of the events, because what's happening across the country is impacting what's happening in your local market, including where I am today here in Frisco, Texas. So to start out with, I had mentioned that buyer activity is starting to fall. So what do I actually mean by that? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I recorded a video where we brought up the whole idea of buyer fatigue. It's very real. Buyers have been getting tired. Let's face it, they've been dealing with multiple offers, bidding wars, losing out to all cash, and it gets frustrating. They're frustrated, they're tired, they're fed up, they don't want to do it anymore, and many of them are starting to take a pause from searching for a home. And we can see that here on this chart. Let me move myself a little bit here. So what this graph you're looking at here, it's showing buyer traffic in April, May, and June. Now, the darker the blue, the stronger the buyer traffic. And by buyer traffic here, I'm referring to the number of showings, the number of active buyers in a given market. And you can see virtually the whole country in April was dark blue, meaning very, very strong buyer activity. That started to change in May. We had some of that lighter blue start to appear, and even a lighter blue in Alaska. And then you go to June, and now look at what's happened there. Now you've got Alaska swung back, so I'm not sure what happened with Alaska. But you started to see a whole swath of the country start to go lighter blue, right, in June. So you're starting to see less buyer activity. At the same point in time, all of the major media outlets started to talk about a decline in sales. And the sales numbers that were coming out were declining. And pending sales were down, closed sales were down. And so here you go. The housing boom is officially over. Home sales dropped to a new low. Pending home sales drop. Home sales drop. Prices continue to rise. And these headlines are great and all, and they're attention grabbing, but they're not telling the whole story. Obviously, the market that we're in right now has been starved with supply. There's been a lack of sellers. Buyer activity has been really strong since the beginning of the year. You can't sell what isn't on the shelf, right? If there's no inventory to sell, then home sales can't just magically keep appearing. You can't just sell air, although I'm sure some people would like to try. But when you look at this, it's not, this drop-off does not by any means indicate that there's a massive correction coming in housing. I put a link to my blog directly below. I encourage you to check that out, because I go into this in detail each and every week with more specific information on the market itself. But you've got buyers that are basically tired. So as the buyers start to come back, demand starts to wane slightly. And one of the reasons that demand started to wane is home prices. The whole talk of affordability and home prices were rising too fast has been coming into play. Here's what we're looking at year over year with regards to price appreciation. January, February, March, April, May, that's the last month that CoreLogic released their numbers. It shows the year over year percentages. I can tell you here in North Texas, in Frisco and Prosper, our year over year median price appreciation is greater than this. We're in the low 20% range. Same in Southern California for many of the markets. We've been looking at just over or right around 20% as well. So again, You've got buyers dealing with multiple offers, dealing with bidding wars. You've got prices that seem to be going up daily. I mean, all the memes have been coming out like crazy. You know, a buyer says, I want to go see a more expensive house. And they said, well, we'll just come back and see this one tomorrow. I mean, that's what's going on in the market. Okay. So what is not advantageous for buyers is advantageous for sellers. And that kind of shows up here when I talked about seller traffic being up. So here, look at seller traffic in April, May, and June. Okay, so in the top left, as I'm looking at this, April, a lot of the country's in gray. Just like with buyer traffic, seller traffic, the darker the blue, the stronger the seller traffic. The darker the gray, the weaker the seller traffic. And by seller traffic, I'm referring to listings. I'm referring to the number of new homes coming onto the market, right? The number of sellers that are starting to participate in the market. So in April, you've got a little bit of blue. And then in May, you've got a couple of more states adding in blue. And then in June, you start to see blue in more areas than you had in the past previous months. Well, if prices keep going up, sellers start to say, well, I think I want to take advantage of this. It's a great time to sell. So while the buyers are starting to pull back, the sellers are starting to come full force onto the market, not necessarily full force. Keep in mind that all of these numbers are still below what we saw in the summer of 2020, right? So we're still not at that level of activity. But obviously, when you've got pricing going up the way it has, right, you're then going to get these sellers that want to start to take advantage of that market. And that's showing here the new monthly listing counts in thousands of 548,000 is the new monthly listing. Again, this is national as of July. So I can tell you in Frisco and Prosper, Texas, new listing or total active listings on the market has gone up. We're not talking drastic. In Frisco, we've gone from 0.9 months supply of inventory to 1.1, but it is edging up. Okay, the same is true in Southern California. We're seeing it across the country. Now, what is interesting, and there's a couple of things to point out here, is that as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, mortgage rates fell in the last week. That wasn't really expected. It's not expected that it's a long-term fall. They actually fell to about 2.77%, which is not far off the low of 2.65% we saw earlier this year. So the question is, why did they fall? Well, to be honest with you, it was a reaction to the uptick in COVID cases with this Delta variant that's starting to take hold across the country. That's actually what pushed mortgage rates down. It is widely expected as we go through this year and into next year that mortgage rates will tick up. But again, it really depends on several factors, such as the market's reaction to the Delta variant. So we've got to see what impact that has. But what I do want to point out here is if you're in the market to buy or you're in the market to sell, what you're going to start to see is balance come back into the market. So those news headlines I showed you earlier, it doesn't indicate that the market is crashing by any means, but the market is starting to turn. We've been talking about this for a couple of months now. What you're going to start to see is more sellers come to market. You're also going to start to see as buyers start to withdraw a little bit and more sellers come in, you're going to start to see the bidding wars go away. You're going to start to see the days on market extend outwards, right? So instead of a home receiving 20 offers within the first 4 days, right, they may get 3 or 4 in the first 10. Just as an example. It doesn't mean it's going away completely, and it's going to vary from market to market. But the interesting thing to watch over the next few weeks will be, does that drop in interest rates, which wasn't expected, is that going to bring a few buyers back into the market and push this inventory down a little bit here. The other thing I want to point out is you may have noticed in your market that you're starting to see a few price reductions. And I don't want you to confuse price reductions with a depreciating market. They're not the same thing. What has been happening, especially the way prices have been going, is that many sellers have been pricing their homes ahead of the market, knowing that within a month or so, the market will catch up, right? And in many cases, it's not taking a month, it's taking a week with the multiple offers. With the buyer pullback, you're finding some of those sellers are realizing that they were too aggressive. They priced their home too high. And this pace of appreciation is going to slow. So there's a mismatch there. So if those sellers really do want to sell, those are the price reductions that you're seeing to bring those homes back into line with what market value actually is. That's not an indication that the overall trends within the market are declining, because they're not. The trend line is still upwards, and I invite you to go back and check out some of the other videos where I covered this in the last couple of weeks. So hopefully this information helps you. If you're in the market to buy or sell. And the reason I do this, it's best summed up by what Mark Hackett, he's the Chief Investment Research Officer at Nationwide. And here's what he has to say. He goes, when you have a void of information, emotion tends to drive decision making. And I think we all know this to be true. I'm not saying that people shouldn't go with their gut, but you should go with your gut based on some information to back it up. Look at all of the facts. The idea behind these videos is not to convince you to do one thing or another, but there's a lot of misinformation out there. So what I'm trying to do here is provide you with the information, the actual facts, the actual numbers, and the actual events that are taking place in our market so that you can make the best decision for you and your family. Now, if you have any questions whatsoever or a specific situation you'd like to talk through, give me a call. I'm always happy to talk to you. You can reach me at 888-447-9650.